and with a disability. Rick Hansen Foundation Accessibility Certification Training teaches those responsible for designing and managing buildings how to create inclusive spaces. Learn how to improve accessibility and inclusion for people with mobility, vision, and hearing disabilities. Residents of Ontario are eligible for free tuition thanks to funding provided by the Government of Ontario. Register today at rickhansen.com/courses.
The most important news on the planet.
You're listening to The World of Elliot Tepper on City News.
And welcome back to the show. David Smith here with Professor Elliot Tepper on The World on City News, and continuing our discussion now about the Chinese election interference story. In the wake of reporting on an alleged clandestine network of Chinese state agents working in Canada to influence our elections, there are growing calls now for the federal government to take action. And the main call, supported by all opposition parties in the House of Commons, is for a full independent public inquiry. And members of Parliament will begin debating that starting on Monday. But there have also been suggestions that Canada should be expelling diplomats named in this leaked CSIS intelligence, and that Canada should have a foreign agent registry. So, Professor Tepper, I wonder if you could give us some analysis on what the considerations are. What considerations there are for a government when it comes to taking diplomatic action against China. I imagine it's a very delicate situation for Canada in terms of our diplomatic relationship with China. And I assume that any action taken by Canada would draw a reaction from Beijing. So what are some of the risks for Canada here? Would it be prudent to start kicking out Chinese diplomats just because their names appear in these classified CSIS documents?
I'm still trying to sort through a lot of the issues here on the institutional response. The traditional response will be if you find evidence of malfeasance, yes, it's appropriate to act. But then you go back to that distinction between an intelligence report and evidence. China said, oh, this is just another attempt to smear us. You don't really have any proof. You're relying on non-named and unreliable sources. So all governments, every government, will be very cautious in relying on other than incontrovertible and deeply offensive actions before a little power starts kicking out the diplomats from major power. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. It just means that the threshold for that level of action, as opposed to others, because there's other ways you can call in the diplomats. Our foreign minister just is doing some lecturing to her counterpart, I believe in Munich. So there are other ways of expressing yourself forcibly without going to the extreme of actually expelling diplomats. And yes, indeed, there is a cost if you do so. If we expel their diplomats, they will undoubtedly expel ours. We have a smaller representation in China than they have here. They have a very large, second only to the U.S., the number of representatives they have here. That's interesting, isn't it? They have so many diplomats here, but they would then reduce the number of people we have on the ground in Beijing to do the kind of reporting that all embassies do.
Why is it that they have such a large diplomatic presence here? Why does Beijing have so many representatives? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good curiosity, David. I think all the things we're talking about, these foreign police stations, there's strong evidence of interference of an inappropriate type into the internal affairs of Canada and other states. There is a broad pattern of this, and that mentions the U.S. and the FBI saying it isn't just an election interference, it's a much broader phenomenon of interference in an inappropriate fashion. So the size of the representation here is itself interesting. We are right next to the U.S. and other things, and if they do wish to interfere here, then they've got more means of doing so. They just have the people to undertake this kind of activity.
Very interesting. Okay. Now I'd like to ask you about China's United Front Work Department. Okay, I hadn't actually heard very much about this. I had heard the name before, but this week I started looking into it more and more after, on Thursday, a comment from the director of CSIS. So, as I understand it, it's a Chinese government department dedicated entirely to influencing foreign institutions. And during his testimony at a parliamentary committee this week, the director of Canada's spy agency, David Vigneault, said that the United Front Work Department is now a bigger department than China's entire Department of Foreign Affairs. It has more budget for the United Front Work Department than it does for its Department of Foreign Affairs. Is that true? And what else is known about this organ of the Chinese regime?
It is a deliberately shadowy form of aspect of the regime. It's a magic component. This is our magic weapon, says Xi Jinping. It actually started internally during the Civil War. It was used by the emerging Communist Party as part of its struggle against the KMT to recruit people and to influence the opposition and so forth. So it had a domestic form initially. However, it has taken on the new overseas aspects, which have been vastly expanded under Xi Jinping. Apparently he hired 44,000 more people. David, the figure I saw, an estimate I saw, is that their budget is 4 times as large, that their personnel is 4 times as large as the diplomatic service. And we just talked a bit about the diplomatic service here. So it is a major component, a magic weapon that Xi Jinping says, and their rise to power by influencing people abroad through those, and this is where we go back to the distinction, not necessarily soft power, but if they so choose, between coercion and corruption.
So this department, the United Front Work Department, it's the body that is behind these influence campaigns. For example, the police stations we have here in Canada, the election, and other forms of intimidation against Chinese Canadian citizens, right?
Yes. We're probably closing off our conversation on this aspect tonight. We need to underline that they have a massive operation abroad, basically to subvert the democracies of the world and to rise on the back of disrupting democracies and influencing states abroad through these coercive methods. I think my bottom line here is that one thing we've talked about is that Canada's diasporas are aggressive. This should not be acceptable that Canadians of Chinese origin or any other country's origin, China's not alone in having diasporas. We have a massive diaspora in the U.S., for example. I went to a fascinating Canada Day celebration of the digital moose one time in San Francisco. But that's soft power. But the diasporas are at risk, and I think we have to keep that right in the forefront. But also, the bottom line here is, as we're discovering, the government of Canada does have many layers of assessing threats to democracy, to the election. We've created ahead of the U.S. A special committee to deal with China. There's multiple investigations going on now. But the bottom line of all this is Canada has to up its game now on foreign interference.
Right, and on that note, just quickly here to wrap up the discussion, okay, whether or not China's election interference campaign actually had any impact whatsoever on the results of the last 2 elections, regardless of that, it has now become a political scandal for the Trudeau government, and it is attracting a lot of media attention, international media attention as well. Do you think that China sees this as a win? Have they done what they wanted to do here?
I don't think attracting negative attention to their behavior abroad is what they want to do.
Right.
This is really a loss for them. What's happened around the world now, and Canada's played a major role in all this, is this has further deepens the negative Canadian and global perception of China. After the 2 Michaels incident, Canada led the way on arbitrary detention measures around the world, treaties and so forth. I think it was up to 55, 60 countries last I looked. So, just as another point in all this, if China's trying to influence Canadian domestic politics, they're not very good at it. We just had a parliamentary committee set up, again, long before the U.S. We're setting up new ones now. But when it came to condemning the Uyghur actions, the actions against the Uyghurs, Parliament unanimously passed a controversial resolution that this was genocide, with the government of Canada officials abstaining on that. So there is an increase in consensus in Canada about the nature of the Xi Jinping Communist Party regime. And in China.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, we'll stop here, and when we come back from our break, we will turn our attention again to the war in Ukraine. Several major updates on that story this week. We will have all of the details for you on the other side of this break. I'm David Smith. I'm here with Professor Elliot Tepper. This is The World on City News, and we'll be back in a moment.
Number one for local news, traffic, and weather for Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News 101.1 everywhere.
Good morning, it's March 5th. I'm Mark Day. Here's what's making news right now. The annual general meeting for the Ontario Liberal Party continues in Hamilton today. One of the biggest highlights from yesterday is that the party's changing the way it chooses its leader.
The Liberals say this is their biggest annual general meeting in 2 decades as they try to rebuild following several lost elections. One thing the party hopes will help is to engage as many people as possible in choosing their next leader. Members voted Saturday to adopt a direct vote to elect their next leader, the person they hope will defeat Doug Ford in the next provincial election. Under the new system, every party member will be able to cast a vote using a ranked ballot, something interim leader John Fraser says will give all party members a say. This replaces the delegate convention system where one delegate represents a group of members and only that person actually votes for a leader. There's no date yet for when the leadership contest will be or any confirmation of who will be in the race. Once the Liberals elect their new executives today, they'll start building a timeline and set a date for nominations. Sophia Favarizzo, City News.
New polling shows that most Canadians are still in favor of universal health care, but shows there is confusion over what makes healthcare services private. Ontario is one province expanding private delivery through surgical clinics, but the costs will still be covered by the government. City's Shelley Lee reports on the reaction.
You know, the big issue is how do you regulate them to make sure that they're not skimping on